Christmas night in Kumasi was warm, but Amma Kruma felt cold inside. At 62, she sat quietly at the long dinner table, her hands folded in her lap, watching her family laugh and talk. The room was full of noise, plates clinking, chairs scraping, loud jokes, but none of it reached her heart. She was there, yet she felt invisible. Amma was a widow. Her husband had been gone for many years, but nights like this made the loneliness feel fresh. The smell of jollof rice filled the air, and the Christmas lights blinked softly on the walls. Everyone looked happy, everyone except her. Her son, Kwesi, sat only 2 seats away. She kept stealing small glances at him, hoping he would look back, smile, or even say her name. But Kwesi avoided her eyes. He laughed with his wife, checked his phone, and talked to his friends like his mother wasn't even in the room. Each time Amma tried to catch his attention, he turned his head away. She remembered other Christmas nights, when Kwesi was young and sat close to her, holding her hand under the table. Back then he used to wait for her smile before eating. Now he didn't even ask if she was comfortable. Amma shifted in her chair, her chest tight. No one noticed. No one asked if she was okay. The laughter grew louder, and her silence grew heavier. She swallowed hard and forced a small smile, pretending she was fine. But inside, her heart whispered a painful truth. This was the quietest Christmas she had ever known, not because the house was silent, but because her place in it was. Amma stood near the dining table, holding her plate with both hands. She looked around, then slowly moved toward the empty chair beside her son. Felt natural to sit there. He was her child. That seat had once been hers for many years. She didn't think twice. As she pulled the chair back and began to sit, her arm brushed against Kwesi's. Before she could even settle down, he pushed her arm away. Not gently, not by mistake. His voice was clear and cold. "This seat is not for you." The words hit the room like a stone dropped into water. Laughter stopped. Forks froze in midair. Someone coughed. Another person looked down at their plate. The music playing softly in the background suddenly felt too loud. Amma stood there, half sitting, half standing, her hands shaking. For a moment she thought she had heard him wrong. She looked at Kwesi's face, waiting for a smile, a joke, anything that would turn the moment into something less painful. But he didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, his jaw tight, like he had already decided she didn't belong there. Her plate felt heavy. Her chest felt tight. She slowly straightened up, still standing beside the chair that was no longer hers. No one said a word. Not her sister-in-law. Not her nephew. Not even the elders at the table. Every face was turned away, pretending nothing had happened. Amma wanted someone, anyone, to speak, to say, "That's your mother," to tell Kwesi to stop. But the silence stayed. Cruel. Her ears began to ring. Memories rushed into her mind without permission. She saw herself years ago, standing in the hot market, selling vegetables from morning till night. She remembered skipping meals so Kwesi could eat. She remembered walking long distances just to save a few coins for his school books. All of that love, all of that sacrifice. And now she was being pushed away like a stranger. Kwesi finally spoke again, softer this time, but just as sharp. "Please sit over there," he said, pointing to a chair near the end of the table. Far corner. Away from him. Away from the center. Away from importance. Amma nodded slowly. She didn't trust her voice. If she spoke, she knew she might cry, and she refused to give them that. She picked up her plate and walked to the empty chair. Each step felt heavy, like she was walking through deep water. As she sat down, her hands trembled. Her food was untouched, but her appetite was gone. She stared at the plate, blinking back tears. No one looked at her. The conversation slowly started again, forced laughter filling the space, as if her pain was an inconvenience everyone wanted to forget. Amma swallowed hard and lowered her head. In that moment, she understood something painful and clear. The humiliation was not just the words Kwesi spoke. It was the silence that followed. And that silence told her exactly where she stood in her own son's life. Amma sat quietly, but her mind was far away from the table. The voices around her faded, and old memories began to rise, clear and heavy. She remembered a time when she was not invisible. A time when her whole world was one small boy who called her Mama with pride. Kwesi's father died when Kwesi was still young. From that day, Amma became everything: mother, father, protector, provider. Life did not slow down for her grief. The next morning she tied her wrapper tight, wiped her tears and went to the market. Every day after that, she woke before sunrise, carried heavy baskets, and stood under the hot Kumasi sun until her feet burned. She smiled at customers even when her body was tired and her heart felt empty. There were days she came home with just enough money for one meal. On those days, Amma gave the food to Kwesi and told him she had already eaten at the market. It was a lie she repeated many times. At night, when hunger twisted her stomach, she drank water and reminded herself that her child was full. That was enough. When Kwesi grew older and school became expensive, Amma made harder choices. She had a small box where she kept her jewelry: simple gold earrings, a necklace from her wedding day, a ring her husband gave her before he died. One by one she sold them. Each piece carried a memory, but she traded memories for school fees, uniforms and books. She never told Kwesi. She didn't want him to feel guilty. She wanted him to feel hopeful. She walked him to school every morning, praying silently as he disappeared through the gate. She believed his future would be brighter because of her sacrifices. And for a long time it felt worth it. Kwesi grew confident. He spoke well. People praised him and said, "Your son will go far." Those words kept Amma going when her back ached and her hands cracked from work. But somewhere along the way things changed. As Kwesi's life became bigger, Amma's place in it became smaller. Her old clothes, her tired body, her simple ways no longer fit into his new world. She stopped being the woman who raised him and became the poor mother, who reminded him of where he came from. Now, she sat at the same table that once held her dreams, feeling like an unwanted guest. The woman who skipped meals was now treated like a burden. The hands that worked until they shook were now pushed aside. Amma lowered her eyes, her heart heavy with a quiet pain. She finally understood how she became invisible. It didn't happen in one day. It happened slowly, with every sacrifice forgotten, every struggle erased, until the mother who gave everything was left with nothing but silence. Amma watched her son from across the room and wondered when he became someone she no longer recognized. Kwesi used to be gentle. He used to lower his voice when he spoke to elders and always greet people with respect. Now, the way he sat, the way he spoke, the way he carried himself felt different, like he was wearing a mask that didn't belong to him. Everything began to change after his marriage. Kwesi's wife came from a family that lived well. They dressed nicely, spoke confidently, and knew important people. Suddenly, Kwesi started caring about things he never cared about before. He talked about status, about image, about what people would say. Amma heard new words in his mouth, words that felt heavy and sharp. He made new friends too. Friends who laughed loudly and talked about money and business. When they visited, Amma noticed how Kwesi spoke to her differently. Short answers. No warmth. Sometimes no words at all. He introduced everyone with pride, but when it came to her, his voice dropped. "That's my mother," he would say quickly, as if hoping the conversation would move on. Amma felt the change in small moments. Kwesi stopped walking beside her and walked a few steps ahead. He stopped asking her opinion. He stopped sitting close. And slowly he stopped being proud of her. She saw it in his eyes whenever she wore her old clothes or spoke in her simple way. She saw the embarrassment he tried to hide. One afternoon, she overheard him speaking on the phone. He was laughing, telling someone that his mother was old-fashioned and doesn't understand how things work now. Amma stood still, holding a bowl in her hands, her chest tightening with every word. She didn't confront him. She quietly returned to her room and closed the door. She remembered the boy who once ran to her after school, showing her his results with excitement. That boy used to say, "Mama, I will take care of you one day." Now, the man he had become barely noticed her presence. At family gatherings, Amma felt like a shadow. Kwesi spoke confidently among people, his head held high. But when she came near, his smile faded. He corrected her in front of others. He rushed her words. He avoided sitting close, as if her poverty might rub off on him. Amma didn't argue. She didn't cry out loud. She watched. She listened. And inside her, something slowly cracked. Loving him had always been easy. Watching him become ashamed of her was the hardest thing she had ever done. Her heart broke quietly, without noise, without tears. She still loved him the same, but she began to accept a painful truth. The son she raised was gone, replaced by a man who saw her not as his foundation, but as something he needed to hide. Amma sat at the table for a few more minutes, staring at the food in front of her. The rice was getting cold. Her hands were still. Around her, the laughter had returned, louder than before, as if nothing had happened. People talked, ate, and joked, stepping carefully around her silence. No one looked at her. No one asked if she was okay. Slowly, Amma pushed her chair back. The sound was soft, but in her heart it felt loud. She stood up, leaving the plate untouched. Her stomach was empty, but she had no hunger left. Without saying a word, she turned and walked away from the table. No one stopped her. She stepped outside into the cool night air. The Christmas lights hung across the yard, blinking red and gold. They looked beautiful, but they made her feel even more alone. Amma walked to the edge of the compound and sat down on a low stool near the wall. From there, she could still hear the voices inside, the music, the joy that no longer included her. She wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders and looked up at the sky. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. She had cried enough in her life, over loss, over struggle, over sacrifice. Tonight felt different. Tonight, something inside her was settling, becoming quiet. She thought about all the times she had begged for small things. Little attention, kind word, a seat beside her son. She realized how tired she was of stretching her heart toward people who kept pulling away. Love, she now understood, should not feel like punishment. The Christmas lights flickered, and with each soft blink, a clear thought formed in her mind. She could not change Kwesi. She could not force respect, but she could choose herself. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she stopped chasing love that hurt her. Amma took a deep breath, felt like breathing for the first time in years. She made a quiet decision there in the darkness, one she had never planned to make. She would no longer beg to be seen. She would no longer shrink herself to make others comfortable. If they could not value her, she would value herself. Inside the house, someone laughed loudly. Amma didn't flinch. She stood up slowly, her back straight, her heart calm. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled her. That night, under the Christmas lights, Amma walked away from the table, but more importantly, she walked away from the habit of begging for love. And in that quiet moment, something new began. That night, after Amma left the table and the voices faded behind her, she lay awake on her thin mattress. The house was quiet now, but her mind was not. Old memories came back, not painful ones this time, but careful ones she had kept locked away for years. There was a secret Amma had never spoken about. Not to her son, not to relatives, not even to close friends. It was something she carried alone, the same way she had carried her struggles. Long ago, before her husband passed away, he had taken her on a journey to Cape Coast. They walked the land together, barefoot on the red soil, while he spoke softly about the future. That land was his inheritance, a quiet piece of property close to the sea. When he died, the papers were left in Amma's name. She remembered holding them with shaking hands, unsure what to do with such responsibility. People advised her to sell it. Others said she should tell the family and share it. But Amma chose silence. She knew how money changed people. She had seen brothers turn into enemies and families break apart. She didn't want that for her son. She didn't want Kwesi growing up surrounded by arguments and greed. So she kept quiet. She folded the documents carefully and hid them away, deep in her old wooden box, under faded clothes and memories. As the years passed, the land grew in value, but Amma never spoke of it. When Kwesi struggled, she helped in small ways, never mentioning what she truly owned. When relatives complained about her poverty, she swallowed her pride. When people looked down on her, she let them. She believed peace was worth more than pride. Sometimes late at night she would take the papers out and look at them, not with excitement but with calm. They reminded her that her life was more than what people saw, that she was not as powerless as she appeared. Still, she chose silence, believing it was the best way to keep the family together. Amma understood now how heavy that silence had been. She had protected everyone else, even when it cost her respect. Her secret was never about wealth. It was about sacrifice, about choosing unity over recognition. As she lay there, listening to the distant sound of the sea in her memory, Amma felt something shift inside her. The secret she had carried for so long was not shameful. It was proof of her strength, her patience, her love. She closed her eyes, her heart steady. She did not know yet how or when the truth would come out, but for the first time she felt ready. Ready to stop hiding behind silence. Ready to let the world see that the quiet woman they ignored had a story, and a power they never imagined. Life has a way of changing quietly, without warning. For Kwesi, it began with a phone call he didn't expect, then another, and another. His business, the one he spoke about with so much pride, was no longer doing well. Payments were late. Promises fell through. The confidence in his voice slowly disappeared. First he ignored the calls. He told himself it was just a bad season. But the bank did not stop calling. Letters arrived. Meetings were scheduled. The pressure followed him everywhere, even into his sleep. The same people who once praised his success now asked hard questions. One afternoon, Kwesi sat across from a bank officer, his hands clenched tightly together. The officer spoke calmly, but the words were heavy. He needed collateral, something solid, something in his name or his family's name. Without it, the bank could not help him. Kwesi left the office feeling smaller than he had in years. That evening he called family members, asking questions he had never asked before. Who owned land? Who had property? Who could help? The room that once echoed with laughter now filled with worry. That was when an old uncle cleared his throat and mentioned Cape Coast. He spoke carefully, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. He said Amma's late husband had owned land there. He said the papers were still valid. He said the land was not sold. Kwesi froze. "What land?" he asked, his voice tight. The uncle looked surprised. "Your mother never told you," he replied. The documents were brought out that same night, yellowed with age but clear. Names written in ink that could not be erased. Nkrumah, owner. The room went silent, just like it had on Christmas night. Faces turned toward Amma. Eyes widened. Whispers filled the air. The woman they ignored. The woman they pushed aside. She owned land worth more than any of them imagined. Kwesi stared at the papers as if they were a lie. His mind raced. All the moments he had dismissed her. All the times he had felt ashamed. And all this time she had said nothing. Amma sat quietly, her hands resting in her lap. She did not smile. She did not explain herself. Her silence now carried weight. Shock spread through the family. Questions followed. Why didn't you tell us? How long have you had this? What else don't we know? Amma lifted her eyes slowly. Her voice was calm. I kept quiet to keep peace, she said. I thought love would be enough. No one replied. The power in the room had shifted, not with shouting or anger, but with truth. The woman they had treated like nothing was suddenly the one holding everything together. And in that quiet moment, Kwesi understood something that shook him deeply. The respect he had refused to give his mother was now standing in front of him, written clearly in ink, and he could no longer ignore it. Kwesi did not come back as a proud man this time. He came quietly, early in the morning when the house was still calm. Amma was sitting by the window, peeling garden eggs into a bowl, when she heard his footsteps. She did not turn around. She already knew who it was. He stood there for a long moment before speaking. When he finally did, his voice was low and broken. "Mama," he said. Just one word, but it carried years of distance and regret. Amma looked up slowly. Kwesi's eyes were red. His shoulders were heavy. The confidence he once wore so loudly was gone. He moved closer and sat down across from her, his hands shaking. Then the tears came. Not the quiet kind, but deep, painful ones he could no longer hold back. "I'm sorry," he said again and again. The room filled with apologies. He spoke about stress, about pressure from work, about trying to fit into a world that judged him. He blamed pride. He blamed the people around him who made him feel ashamed of where he came from. He blamed everything he could find, searching for words strong enough to erase what he had done. Uma listened. She did not interrupt him. She did not raise her voice. She simply watched him, the same way she had watched him take his first steps, fall and stand again. Her face was calm, but her heart felt heavy. Kwesi leaned forward, his hands covering his face. "I forgot myself," he cried. "I forgot you." He spoke about the Christmas night, about the chair, about the silence. Each memory cut deeper than the last. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, though the pain had already been done. Amma nodded slowly. She let him speak until there were no words left. The room grew quiet again, but this time it was different. It was not the silence of shame. It was the silence of truth. When Amma finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I heard you," she said. That was all. Kwesi looked up, searching her face for anger, for forgiveness, for something clear. But Amma gave him nothing more. No long speech. No comfort. No blame. Just her presence. She stood up gently and began to rinse the garden eggs. The simple sound of water filled the space between them. Kwesi realized then that apologies could not undo years of neglect. Tears could not replace respect. Amma loved her son. That had never changed. But she had learned something important. Love did not mean losing herself. As Kwesi watched her move calmly around the room, he understood that coming back humbled was only the first step. The real work had just begun. Amma did not rush her decision. After Kwesi left that morning, she sat alone for a long time, thinking. Her heart was still tender, but her mind was clear. She had spent her whole life putting others first. This time she would not. She knew she could choose revenge. She could remind everyone of the pain they caused her. She could let Kwesi struggle and watch him learn his lesson the hard way. But that kind of victory felt empty. It was not who she was. Amma did not want power that came from bitterness. She wanted peace that came from dignity. When Kwesi returned a few days later, Amma invited him to sit. She spoke calmly, without anger in her voice. "I will help you," she said. Kwesi's shoulders relaxed, relief flooding his face. But then she continued, and her tone changed. Not harsh, just firm. "I will help you on my terms." Kwesi looked up, surprised. Amma explained slowly. She would not hand over the land. She would not be pushed aside again. Any help she gave would be done with respect and transparency. Decisions would no longer be made without her. She would no longer accept being spoken to with shame or silence. "This is my life too," she said quietly. "And I matter." For the first time, Kwesi did not argue. He listened. He nodded. He saw something new in his mother's eyes. Strength without anger, authority without shouting. It unsettled him more than any harsh words could have. Amma went further. She told him she would not tolerate disrespect in public or private. She would not be hidden or corrected in front of others. She would not beg for a chair at any table. "If I am not welcome," she said, "I will not force my way in." The words were simple, but they were heavy. These were boundaries Amma had never set before. For years she believed silence was love. Now she understood that silence had only taught others how to ignore her. Kwesi swallowed hard. He agreed. Not because he was desperate, but because he finally understood. The help he needed came with a price. And that price was respect. Amma felt something lift from her chest. She was still kind, still loving, but she was no longer small. Helping did not mean surrendering herself again. That evening, as Amma prepared her meal, she felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because she had chosen herself without becoming cruel. She had drawn a line with calm hands and a steady heart. Her final decision was not loud. It did not involve punishment or pride. It was simple and powerful. From that day on, respect was no longer optional. It was the only way forward. The next Christmas felt different even before anyone arrived. Amma Kruma had cleaned the house, arranged the lights and set the table, but this time she did it quietly, with a calm in her heart that she had never felt before. She was ready, not just for the celebration, but for the space she had earned. When the family arrived, they carried gifts and laughter, just like every year. But this year something shifted. Amma did not wait for an invitation. She walked straight to the head of the table and pulled out the chair for herself. Her back was straight, her eyes steady, and her smile gentle but full of confidence. Kwesi froze for a moment. He opened his mouth, then paused, his mind catching up to what he was seeing. Amma was not shrinking. She was not bending. She was fully there. His mother, the woman he had once pushed aside, now holding her place without asking for permission. Slowly, Kwesi walked over and pulled the chair out for her. His hands trembled slightly, and he looked down at her, eyes wet with shame and gratitude. No words were needed. The act itself carried everything he could not yet say: regret, respect, and the understanding of all the years he had ignored her worth. The family began to eat, but the noise felt different now. The laughter included her. The conversations circled around her. Amma no longer felt invisible. Every glance, every smile, every gesture reminded her that she had finally reclaimed her place, not through anger or force, but through quiet strength and unwavering dignity. As the night went on, Kwesi leaned closer and whispered, almost to himself, "Mama, I'm sorry." She nodded, her heart soft but steady, knowing that apologies were only part of the story. Respect, love, and recognition were what mattered most. And as Amma looked around the table, seeing the warmth and connection she had earned, she thought quietly to herself, "He pushed me away at the table, but life pushed him back to the truth. And that's when he finally saw me."